Hello and welcome. I'm Dr. Adam Dorsey, a psychologist in Silicon Valley, and I am the host of Super Psyched, a podcast dedicated to supercharging your life. Each episode contains fun, high-quality interviews with experts looking at psychology from all angles. Super Psyched is your tool to get more of what you want in your life and less of what you don't. How many thoughts do you imagine you have per day? Researchers estimate about 60 to 70,000. And so much of the time, we are on autopilot, not paying attention to our thoughts. But even on autopilot, our thoughts, both positive and negative, have an impact on virtually every aspect of our lives. My guest today, neuropsychologist Dr. Mario Martinez, has researched how thoughts and beliefs impact our health. He has conducted worldwide studies on healthy centenarians, that is, people who are 100 years of age or older, and found that only 20 to 25% of longevity can be attributed to genetics. I thought genes played a bigger role, and maybe you did too. Mario is also the author of the best-selling book, The MindBody Code: How to Change the Beliefs That Limit Your Health, Longevity, and Success, and about which Harvard professor Dr. Ellen Langer said, if you're interested in becoming or remaining healthy, read this book. So please join Mario and me as we do a deep dive into the MindBody Code and how to change the beliefs that limit our health, longevity, and success. Dr. Mario Martinez, who I will be calling Mario, welcome to Super Psyched.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be with you again.
I'm so glad to be with you. So, a little background, I saw Mario speak in front of a conference with several hundred people, probably somewhere near 800, and every eye in the room was just glued. I was so compelled by what you said, and there are things I've never forgotten, and I'm so excited that we're going to get to unpack them for the listeners. I guess I'd like to start things out by noting that you invented a great term, just totally brilliant. It's called biocognitive. And based upon your research, it seems that our thoughts and our attitudes can have huge and measurable impact on our health. I was wondering if you could unpack the meaning of biocognitive, which is a potentially intimidating word, just in a way that the listener will be able to report to someone who's hasn't yet listened to this episode and say, hey, I just learned about I learned the term biocognitive and I know it so well, I'm able to share it with you. What is biocognitive?
Well, it's a fun word that I had to come up with. What happened is that I felt that you as a psychologist would know that everyone pretty much agrees that the mind and the body communicate with each other and that there are physiological consequences of psychoneurology and all that. But what was missing, I think, is that we communicate mind and body within a cultural context. And that's what I'm bringing into science, mind, body, culture. And the way to look at culture is that culture is really the collective beliefs of everything that's important. Aesthetics, ethics, wellness, longevity, all these things. The brain is cultural, that we learn from day one that the brain is cultural and the immune system has to be cultural to respond to the brain. But to look at it in a simple way, which is the best way to explain things, you have a world that has a multitude of interpretations. You can interpret the world in many different ways. And your culture will weave a fabric around that world. And what the brain will see is the cultural fabric that we create. That's the way to look at it. And we think that's reality, but it's a cultural reality. For example, the equipment that we have can only perceive through infrared and ultraviolet. That's it. But if you're a bee, you can see the world with ultraviolet. If you're a snake, infrared. If you're a bat, sonar. So what is the world? Infinite possibilities of interpretation with the equipment that you have. But what we have in addition to other animals is the culture. We have sensory, but we have culture. So one simple example. We know now in psychoneurology that to shame someone causes inflammation. It increases molecules of inflammation, tumor necrosis factor, other types of interleukins and so forth. But first, for example, if you look at the frontal lobe of the brain, the prefrontal lobe, that's where self identifies. You talk about self and the functional MRIs, which is a real-time picture of the brain, will show activity right in the middle of that area. You talk about yourself, it's right there. You talk about your mother or something else and it goes somewhere else. And you would say, okay, that's universal, but it's not. You talk to Asian cultures, which are collectivists, and you say, talk about yourself, and that lights up. Talk about your mother, that stays there, doesn't move. So the brain learns cultural perception rather than just perception. And so it's very important when I work with companies around the world, the first thing that I do is I become very, very knowledgeable of the culture so we can do what I call hybrid leadership. Otherwise, it doesn't work.
I used to live in Japan, and I'm really attuned to the idea that words just taken out of context have vastly different meanings, even if they are literally, quote, the same word,
Yes.
depending on the culture in which it's spoken. I think about also extrapolating on what you're talking about, that the Inuit people, formerly referred to as Eskimos, famously have several words for snow. And for us, it would just be snow. But for them, there would be variations on that. You even refer to migraines as being considered a vascular event in the United States, and in other countries, such as perhaps in France, where it's considered more hepatic or liver-based.
Yeah.
And in England, it's more of a gastrointestinal. So is that what you're speaking about?
Yes, because doctors cannot get away from culture. Doctors are part of a culture, and medical schools are part of a culture. So if you go to Germany, you have 60% probability of having a pathologically diagnosed EKG than if you do in the United States. You have a very high probability of having some kind of liver disorder diagnosed if you're in France. Here, depression. We sell more medication for depression, in Germany more for the heart, in France more for the liver, in the UK more for gastrointestinal. So again, it's culture. You can't get away from it.
And you're describing even within a culture, subcultures. I believe it was Bolivia, perhaps it was Uruguay. Was it Bolivia? Where there were three subcultures: the Caucasian Spanish descendants, there were the natives, and then there were the mestizos. And it seems that initially having a diagnosis of anemia, there were vastly different outcomes depending on the expectations.
Yes. And if the shaman pronounces limpu and you were a native, you would die. No Western intervention would change anything.
And limpu, by the way, is anemia in the native tongue.
In the native, that's right. Limpu is anemia.
And you were even talking about a priest giving final rites to the wrong person and the person dying.
You got a great memory. That's right. Yes. And he went to the wrong room.
Went to the wrong room. So these words really matter. I'm wondering, there's so much talk about thoughts as energy and thoughts and what they do and how we metabolize them. At some point, perhaps you'll even talk about how to think like the immune system, but we'll put that on hold for a second. I'm wondering, in the cultural zeitgeist, so many people talk about the law of attraction, which gained, no pun intended, a lot of traction about a decade ago. And I imagine the findings of your research are substantially differentiated from what we perceive to be the law of attraction. I was wondering if you're familiar with the law of attraction and how might your findings be different?
I don't think that there's any law of attraction. I think that what happens is that we have selective perception. So for example, if you are thinking of buying a Rolex watch, you'll see it everywhere you go.
Totally. Exactly.
You don't want a Rolex watch, you don't see it. It goes by your blind spot. So we have that selective perception on the intentions that we have. People talk about how thoughts affect the body and why is it, and is it energy, is it this? The way that I describe it is, again, anthropologically. We had a lot of epigenetic transfers when we were very primitive. We didn't have a language. There was no consciousness. And anthropologists would say that consciousness started when we started burying our dead and when we started creating trinkets that had no function other than aesthetics. That creates a lot of cognition. You have to have some more consciousness for that. And then language came in. So then what happened is that we had a lot of pheromones, which are these flying hormones, flying molecules to, okay, there's a lion about 500 feet away. So we had that really well developed. Language comes in and it becomes dormant because you can say, hey, there's a lion right behind that. So we lost a lot of the phylogenetic transfer and we gained it in language. So what happened then?
What you just shared was so massive and it's ordinary to you, but to the listener and to me, that was so huge. So in the past, we had the skills of a bee, to bring back the idea that a bee can see certain things. And as we became more advanced, we kind of pruned away what we previously had and words became the new way. And I'm guessing that there were gains and losses in this exchange.
Yes, they become biosymbols. And the way that happens is that we're designed to pay attention to our culture editors, people that have been given power in a particular context, father, mother. In order to survive, we're designed that way. So then you're born and you don't have a language and you have very limited cognition, but you see a breast and you have a physiology of hunger, and you go to the breast and you have a physiology of satiation of the hunger. Well, those are processes that you're seeing pre-language. Later, you say, this is a breast, this is mother. That has already been a biosymbol. The biosymbol connects with what you learn physiologically, and you say, mother, okay, so there, mother becomes a biosymbol that already has the perceptual history that you've been experiencing with mother. So that's how language becomes so important. This is why, as we were talking earlier, if you shame somebody, you will have molecules of inflammation. Why? Because the word is biosymbolic. Developmentally, it became biosymbolic once you put language into the experience. And that's how you get it. It's not energy, it's bioinformation that you use because the brain now has to interpret language, and the immune system had to evolve to be able to interpret language also. Because otherwise, you don't have the pheromones anymore, and you don't have the instinctive things anymore. You have to have the language. So then it evolved, the immune system and the nervous system evolved into a language interpreter. So if I say the number 4 in English, it has no connotation. If it's the number 4 with in Japanese and other languages.
Definitely in Japan.
Related to death. And there was a study that looked at hundreds of thousands of people, Asian Americans, and they significantly died around the 4th day of the month.
Wow.
But you don't see that. Why? Because 4 doesn't have a biosymbolic lethal component. They also looked at the 13th, and they wanted to know if the 13th, because of being unlucky, if people died. No, it's a bad number, but it's not a death-related number. So look how the immune system and the nervous system can tell the difference.
It's the idea of sticks and stones may break my bones, but names will never hurt me. That turns out to be false. Names actually do hurt. One of the key tenets of something that an international expert on psychopathy, the studies of psychopaths, revealed that a component of sadism is teasing. And I would think shaming would be a component of sadism. You describe interleukin and inflammation being generated to people who are shamed just through the mere act of words. So words matter. In quantum physics, I believe there's an idea that the observer effect, when somebody observes something or when expectations are imposed on phenomena, that those phenomena change. And I imagine that those two are consistent with your findings.
Yes, in quantum, as you know, it would be metaphorically because quantum is pre-nuclear, under infranuclear. So we're nuclear, and we have certainly a lot of quantum, but we have a lot of quantum qualities that metaphorically could be used, but not necessarily we're saying, okay, I'm doing a quantum thing with you. No, I'm not. It's below the nucleus. And even the forces, the strong force, the weak force are completely different. But you can metaphorically say the quantum field would be like the bioinformational field in that sense. So, for example, if you and I meet, we're doing a coupling before we meet. And the coupling, I'll look at you, and then our brain, as a psychologist, we trick ourselves into linearity with the left part of the brain. Stimulus response, but it's been a coupling already that you bring your premature cognitive cognitions into it, and I bring mine, and then based on our histories, we couple. And
exactly.
Then we start the back and forth into finding out who you are and what I am, but we've coupled already.
And is there an aliveness between us or not?
That's
right. Do I wish to stay engaged? Is this interesting?
Yes.
Or not?
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. And sometimes it's unilateral. For example, I could have come up to you during the conference and said, oh my gosh, Dr. Martinez, that was the most amazing thing I've ever seen. And you could say, I'm not interested. Just another fanboy. Or you might say, hey, tell me about yourself. And there might actually be something alive.
Of course. Yes. That's right.
I've got to ask you this now. If you could describe how to hack into the immune system with words, how do we think like the immune system? You've had some great findings here.
It took me years and years to figure out what I'm doing. I'm saying is, okay, how can the immune system make so many decisions the way it does under adversity without consulting the brain and just, you don't even have to think about it. And I came up with a concept of what I call local intelligence and distributed control. You have, for example, a neutrophil, little immune cell that's going around looking for trouble. It finds it, and the neutrophil becomes the brain. It doesn't go to the brain. What do I do? The neutrophil knows what it can do within its own horizons. That would be E1, empowerment 1. What can I do for myself that nobody can do for me? They go there, they see a little bacteria, they take care of it, but then they see a cancer cell that they can't handle. Immediately, it goes into distributed control. They call the T cells and they call whatever it is, and they pull out as a little neutrophil. That's E2. What can others do for me that I can't do for myself? Those two things, limited or local intelligence, distributed control, that explains why it works that way. And they don't have to go to the brain. They do that on their own. Local intelligence becomes a brain, and that's how I teach corporations to deal with the problem.
I was wondering if you were to use really, really layperson's language to attend to how to think like the immune system. First off, it sounds like it is possible to actually hack into the immune system almost as if, and what have some of your best findings been in terms of hacking into the immune system, thinking like it?
Well, the first thing to do is to define empowerment. And, the empowerment gets all kinds of...
Sure.
But I think this is what empowerment is. Again, simple. Einstein said, if you can't explain something simple, you don't know what you're talking about. So it's got to be very simple. Empowerment simply means access to resources to overcome a challenge. That's it.
That's great. Access to resources to overcome a challenge. And those could be internal resources, perhaps, and external resources.
And external. So you ask yourself, you have an adversity. And adversity changes. What adversity does is it affects what I call terrains. The terrain of adversity has three components. Adversity will affect your attachment to something, your expectations, and your rituals.
And by the way, describe what attachment means in your language.
Attachment would be the extended self that we put out as if a part of us. In a relationship, I can't live without this person.
Like my wife or my children.
The extended self, like the Wilson effect that I call it from the
Wilson effect.
What he did is he extended himself and he called it Wilson, and he risked his life when Wilson came off the raft. And then what we have to do is we have to recall the Wilson effect. We have to recall the extended self as the first thing that we have.
Because Wilson was Tom Hanks's extended self. That volleyball became, with the face on it, became so meaningful to him. Even though ostensibly to us, he was just a volleyball.
That's right. So that's the attachment. So what you do, you have whatever kind of adversity. The first thing is what's happening now is that I have a challenge that's disrupting my objectives. I was going to go to school today and the school's closed. All right. So what happens? I was disempowered, which means that I lost either E1 or E2. What can I do for myself that nobody can do for me? Nothing, because the school's closed. What could others do for me that I can't do for myself? Well, I'll go to school online. So you begin to look at resources. And if E1 doesn't work, you go to E2. If E1 and E2 don't work, what you do is you pull back and you change rituals, attachments, and expectations. So you have operational ways of dealing with adversity.
Change rituals, attachments, and expectations based upon what's available, what's real.
And by the way, adversity could be positive or negative, because I'll give you an example. You have a job and you're told you're fired. All of a sudden, your expectations of being there are gone. The rituals of you getting up in the morning and breakfast and talking to your friends is gone. And the attachments that you made to all those things are gone. So you have to adjust to that problem. But what if the same persons, they say, look, you're going to be executive vice president now, but you have to move. Same thing. Expectations, the attachments, and the rituals will change. That's what causes a sense of adversity. So it's good or bad. A shift in the stability of our perception. And then if you have the tools, if you have the terrain, you know how to navigate it.
What's one thing a person could do to improve their immune system?
Well, first, they have to be aware of what is their default mode. And in neuroscience, they talk about the default mode, which is when everything settles, you have a lens that you look at the world. So you ask yourself, what is my default mode? And the way you find out your default mode is the moment you wake up, what cognitions are you having? Before you go to sleep, what cognitions are you having? You wake up and I got to do this, I got to do that, and then you ask yourself, what theme do I have here? The world is great. The world is dangerous. The world is adversity. And you have a default mode. That's what you impose on the day. So you have to learn how to change that. And I talk about it in the book. First, you have to understand, where's it coming from? Why do I have these problems that I have? And why do I have that selective perception that wherever I go, I have a problem? And the other thing, as you know in the book, I call it cognitive strings. We tie one thing to the other. You get up in the morning, the car won't start. Then you get to work and you forgot the contract that you were supposed to bring, and you tie it and say, a terrible day. It's a cognitive string, has nothing to do one with the other, but we tie it and we perceive that it's going to be a really crappy day for you. And it will, because your perception will look into it to confirm your perception that it's going to be a bad day.
One of the basic tenets of positive psychology is that bad can have heavier weight than good. And I'm thinking about your strings, and I'm thinking even in terms of a chain link, we often talk about the weakest link. You could have perhaps a series of wins and one really bad thing. Does that almost become the weakest link to a chain that would otherwise be a chain of good things?
Yes, because we ontogenetically, we're set up to anything that causes fear is an alarm. So it goes into long-term memory and it becomes very important. The other one, it's okay because, good things, if you have self-esteem problems, it's going to be a difficult thing, but it's not fear. But if something bad happens, the brain has to pay attention to that. So therefore, it becomes very prominent and very important. You remember more of the things that happen. So then it gains salience because of the possible survival component that it may have.
Now, you also mentioned epigenetics, and that's a term that's been thrown around a lot, and it's a great new field in science. If you could just explain to the listener, what does epigenetics mean?
That's a great question, and I tell your audience why we should care. So it was thought, Darwinian and evolutionarily, that it takes hundreds of thousands, millions of years for things to change, that the gene expression is there and that the environment cannot change anything. In epigenetics, it was found not only does the environment change things, the gene expression, but you pass it on to the next generation. People that have been in Auschwitz and concentration camps have a higher cortisol level, and people who are second, third, fourth generation have a higher cortisol level because of the epigenetic transfer that they got. Why is it important? Because what you're doing now is affecting your gene expression, but it's going to be affecting the gene expression of your offsprings. So what you do is for yourself and also for the generation ahead of you. It can affect good gene expression or it can affect bad gene expression depending on what you do. But I'll tell you something that's really, really new in the immune system that proved that Aristotle was right. Aristotle, 2,300 years ago, said that the hedonic life is not enough. The life of pleasure for pleasure, not enough.
Right.
Okay, there's got to be what he called eudaimonia, pleasure with service, pleasure with meaning. So, went on and they argued kind of in their robes, they would argue. Now there's a study that actually identified hedonic people psychologically and eudaimonic people. And they measured something that's called CTRA, which is a set of genes, 21 genes that actually have antiviral, antibody, anti-inflammatory qualities or inflammatory, depending on what you need. It's conserved transcriptional response to adversity. It's a beautiful word, CTRA. So what they found was that the people that were hedonic had worse CTRA response than the people that were eudaimonic.
That makes so much sense to me.
So that's one way to hack the immune system.
So I just want to focus in on the R and the A and the CTRA. It's the reaction to adversity. And you're saying that the fun lovers, the Don Juans of the world, the playboys and the playgirls on insert name of reality show probably are not very resilient.
No, they're not. And so Aristotle was right. But the interesting thing about this is that when they measured the subjective level of pleasure in both groups, it was the same. The immune system could tell the difference between just subjective feeling good and whether it's feeling good with service and meaning or feeling good, just feeling good. So it could go beyond our emotions to look at the meaning component of it. That's incredible.
It's absolutely incredible. And it gives me so much joy to know that positive psychology, which was so much in its infancy just a few years ago, has just bloomed and that we have these profound findings that this is far from a fuzzy arm of psychology, just kind of some new agey non-research. It's rigorously researched and backed up by so many measurable physiological corroboration. So this is very exciting to me.
So it's beautiful. So Aristotle was right.
Aristotle was right.
I'll give you a practical example. I didn't really care too much about recycling. It was no big deal. So I thought, I have a ritual. I go to this really nice Kurdish restaurant, and I would go there every Saturday. That was my ritual. Rituals are extremely important for the immune system. It's one of the causes of health. So then I thought, how can I create a eudaimonic thing here? But you don't want to do pleasure with service that you don't like. It's got to be real pleasurable. So I thought, why don't I start recycling things? And there's a really nice recycle place here. And before I go to my Kurdish place, I'll go and recycle. And I got the pleasure of going there and meeting people and doing the eudaimonic part. And then from then on, I go and do my hedonic part. Amazing, powerful immune enhancer just by doing things like that. But it's got to be meaningful.
Yep.
It's got to have a meaning for you, not just I'm going to do it because I'm afraid that if I don't do it, people are going to think I'm a bad person. No, that doesn't work. That's fear-based.
The central theme of so much of what you are talking about in all of your work is that we are meaning-based animals. And everybody from Shakespeare to the ancient Greeks cited that the meaning that we apply to something all the way up into, modern existentialists, including Viktor Frankl, who was in the concentration camps himself, who realized that his last freedom was that.
Yeah. And the key, I think, is it goes beyond the Darwinian. Darwinian is the survival of the species. Once we develop consciousness, is the survival of meaning.
You just dropped something so huge, the survival of meaning, that's central to everything you've written, but you said it so perfectly.
It just came out. Thank you for picking up on it.
That was enormous. That was a brain dropping just now.
And I'll tell you an example of that. When you talk about survival and the fittest and the species and all that, I always give the Darwinians an example. By the way, the Darwinians are more Darwinian than Darwin because he wrote about love and they talked about it. So anyway, you see a young guy, peak of his potential to pass on the species, who sees an old man who falls into the ocean and there's shark. The old man is done. He's too old. He's not going to contribute anything. And the person jumps in because of the sense of meaning and sense of humanity. How do you explain that? What is he saving? Meaning. You die for your country, you die for your kids. Those are examples that pretty much override this concept of we are just the survival of the fittest. It's the survival of meaning.
And somebody listening might even just say, well, we're wired to do that. That's just part of being human. And yet I would think epigenetics plays a part there too, that over time we've evolved to do that, but there's also the meaning. They're almost unseparatable. I mean, the fear of public speaking, well, that comes about because we fear rejection. Well, why do we fear rejection? Because back in the old days, that meant that we would be exiled from the tribe. That meant we would die.
And burned at the stake, too.
And possibly burned at the stake, like St. Lawrence, right?
Yeah.
San Lorenzo.
It was funny because the Inquisition, they would invite you. And then, of course, they would torture you, and you better show up. That's what they did to Galileo. And they house arrested him because he dared to say that the Earth was not the center of the universe. And we still do it now. We lose grants and we lose jobs when we talk about not being the center of the universe.
As you're talking, I'm thinking about the evolution of recognizing new truths, and that at first you're considered, a heretic. And over time, it becomes just considered obvious.
Yes.
I imagine that there are times when you're sharing your ideas where you're sharing them and somebody's looking at you almost like the lights are not on as you're sharing.
That's right. And Thomas Kuhn talked about that, the structure of scientific revolutions. He said that science doesn't just accumulate. Once there's evidence that the theory cannot be supported anymore, there's a paradigm shift and you drop everything. But the 3 levels, the first level is disdain. You're crazy. What do you mean the earth is? That's the first. If you're intelligent, you go to the evidence and then you go into doubt. And then finally, when the evidence is overwhelming, you go into acceptance, that when you have a paradigm shift. But you have to go through all 3, even with a belief system.
And then what happens after something's accepted as a truth? I don't know anything about the flat earthers, but where they go back and say, no, actually the earth is flat. Is there any explanation for that sociological phenomenon? How does that happen?
Well, yes, because that's the attachment part. The investment is so great in attachment. So the inquisitors, when Galileo talked about that and Copernicus 100 years before, said, no, look, the sacred texts say that, the science says that, we have an investment in this. We're not going to change this. It's easier to disdain you than to do a paradigm shift because there's too much investment in it. So it's an investment issue. And fear of novelty.
And I imagine that there's an evolutionary value to being full of disdain to new ideas.
Yes, it could be a dangerous idea.
Yeah.
But also, you see, cultures will teach you how much adversity you should have to volatility, how much avoidance you would have to adversity. The Japanese have high level of avoidance of adversity. Well, they've had tsunamis, the atomic bomb,
Sure.
they've all kinds of things. The U.S. has very low avoidance of adversity or avoidance of change. So it depends on your history and your culture and what you're taught. In some cultures, in Japan, they tell you, as you know, the nail that sticks out gets hammered back. And here, the squeaky wheel gets the oil. It just depends on the culture. When we studied psychology, the muted-leer illusion, where you see the 2 lines, one goes inward. At the end of the line, you have arrows going inward and arrows going outward in the other one. You could look at it, and they would show you that the lines are equal. And once you look at the ones with the arrows outward, it looks longer. It's an optical illusion. So when I studied neuropsychology, that's it. That's a universal. Until they went to the Kalahari Desert in the southern part of Africa, where they have horizontality cultural perception, and they would ask them, which is longer of the 2? And they say, they're both the same.
To what do you attribute the differences in their vision versus ours?
They have very little verticality. They have a perception that allows them
to... Oh my God. There's not much to look up to.
That's right. It's horizontality.
Oh my gosh. So
like the Eskimos that you mentioned, they have a variance of things and they have a variance of horizontality. So, hey, they're both the same. There's no optical illusion. So even that is learned.
That's incredible. I'm going to pivot to self-sabotage because I think that's a really important phenomenon. I know I experience it at times. And I remember being in Japan playing a gambling game called Pachinko. And I remember I just hit the jackpot. And there are all these balls that come out and you exchange these balls for money. But so many of these metal balls were coming out and I got uncomfortable with the abundance of balls. It felt like it was too much. I felt like I didn't deserve it. And I mean, what had I really done? I put in 100 yen. I didn't deserve this. And I wonder about that. You talk about our fear of abundance, our tendency to self-sabotage. Lottery winners you cite as a very common group of people that end up squandering their money. But I was wondering if you could speak about self-sabotage. How do our thoughts engage in self-sabotage and how might we avoid that unpleasant phenomenon?
This is heavy, as they used to say in the 60s. So
this is heavy, right?
I'll give you my latest. I think what happens is that we confuse performance. And when we confuse performance with actually what is inherently ours, we go by the merit model. You deserve this, you don't deserve that. We don't deserve anything, good or bad. We're inherently predisposed for the abundance of health, wealth, and love. But the problem is that we confuse performance. So, for example, 2 carpenters work at this place. One is a wife beater and a pedophile, but he's a great carpenter. The other one is a great husband and takes care of his children. But the pedophile is a better carpenter. Since we're talking about performance, he will get the rewards, although he doesn't deserve them.
No, yeah.
So we confuse performance with deservingness. If you get away from that and you begin to, and there are ways to introspectively learn, how do I go into my inherent quality of health, wealth, and love as part of my inheritance? Then you get out of, I deserve this, I deserve that. It works well for performance. It doesn't work well with meaning. Meaning is the other one. Performance is the merit-based.
That's fascinating. And what can we do to quiet down our tendency to self-sabotage? I think all humans have that.
Well, let's say the example that you gave of you, I'm not worthy of this. And the first thing you do is, you're right, I'm not worthy of this. I'm not worthy or not worthy. It has nothing to do with it. But what it did is it came to my inheritance of abundance, so I'm going to accept it. If it's bad and you lose the money, I don't deserve it, good or bad. But what is my abundance? My abundance is this, so let me go look for my abundance. So it's a mind shift that's required. The default mode needs to go from merit system to the system of the inheritance of health, wealth, and love. We're wired for that, or we're designed for that, but we have to trigger it. The causes of health are inherited and longevity is learned. But you have to trigger the causes of health before they come out.
Amazing. And, you talk about lottery winners, and there's a famous study that shows over a period of time the relative happiness of lottery winners versus recent amputees. You'd think that, of course, the lottery winners are at the very beginning very happy and the amputees are just horribly depressed. But over time, their lines tend to switch. And you cited 18 months was about how long it takes to lose everything that you've won if you've won the lottery. And I was wondering if you could speak to that and how that transpires. And if somebody were to win the lottery, we're kind of speaking to it already, but if you were in their ear saying, listen, you won the lottery, what would you say?
The first thing is to get out of the merit. Do I deserve this? No. Or do I not deserve this? No, because that's a performance base. If there were performance, you just bought a ticket and you got $1 million. Performance is not, so that doesn't work. So you first have to realize, I have to get out of the merit system here. I have to get out of the merit system and ask myself, how can I tune in to my inherent sense of abundance? And how can I do it by hacking the immune system so it doesn't make me sick? Well, you bring hedonic and eudaimonic qualities to that abundance that you created. And by doing that, you're having pleasure. You buy a beautiful home, and then you donate some money to a worthy cause, and you begin to do hedonic and eudaimonic kinds of things with your abundance. And then you don't have to feel guilty. I used to feel guilty. We talked about before we started about being Jewish and Catholic. Well, I used to feel guilty when things went well for me. And I thought, what about the people that are, and I thought, no, from now on, since it's inherent in me, I'm going to be a model of abundance for others. So I'll allow my abundance to come in so I can show people that abundance is possible. That completely changed the whole sense of guilt, because guilt is based on merit, and merit doesn't work. Merit is only for performance, for work, and if you get up in the morning, not meaning at all.
Slightly related to what we're talking about, you have once said that if someone says, I love you, you say thank you.
Yes.
And I think that's brilliant. Can you speak to that idea?
In Guardians of the Heart was the part that I talk about in relationships, a model that I created based on people that I studied who have been together for 40 or 50 years and they still laugh at each other's jokes. That's a really good indicator.
Truly.
So, that's an indicator. So what happens is that there's a difference between give and take and offer and receive. Give and take is quid pro quo. I give you this, you give me that. And what happens is that it's never a complete. If I give you something in the quid pro quo, I expect something back.
Right.
If you give me something, I expect that I need to give you something back. So it's never ending. It's a lack of closure in Gestalt terms. Offering and receiving, it's a higher level. And rather than quid pro quo, I call it aliquid nihil, which in Latin means something for nothing back. This aliquid nihil is very important because what you're offering is with generosity. Generosity in itself is the gift back. When you're receiving with gratitude, and that is enough for the gift back. You don't have to give anything. So getting back to what you said, you say, I love you, and you say, I love you. And at that moment, you're not feeling I love you. Mm-hmm. Thank you. Gratitude. Thank you. Someday you can say it. Some days you don't. But if you say, I love you, it loses the value and it becomes quid pro quo. It becomes a ledger relationship, and it doesn't work.
Brilliant. You also, by the way, just to build off that idea, my wife and I have a term that we call receiving each other. So if a compliment is given, we let the other know that we've heard the compliment, that it has been received.
Oh, that's beautiful.
And it's not a debit and credit ledger like you were describing. That's just brilliant. I'm also thinking of the fact that you described something totally hilarious, that if you're in traffic and you want to let somebody in, you check with yourself.
You want to let them in without the quid pro quo.
Exactly. And if you offer them a space, and even if they flip you off, you feel a degree of dignity about the interaction because you were giving.
You did it. Abundance and all these wonderful things are basically very selfish. I'm being selfish because I find gratitude. I find generosity in letting you in front of me. Whatever you do, it's independent. Whatever you do is independent.
Totally.
I find a sense of generosity. That's all I need. In fact, one day I did, and a guy gave me a finger because I let him through. And I smiled and I went like this, hey, thank you. I got my reward. I don't need, but it's not merit.
The reward was in the giving itself.
Yes, and the generosity. And then I'll give you a gift and you do whatever you want with it.
That's absolutely brilliant.
That's the idea.
I love that. That's Jedi level stuff. Mario, you've done research with the most interesting populations. And I was wondering if you could talk about your work with centenarians, the people who routinely live to be 100. Some of your findings have been shocking. And I was wondering if you could share some of your findings and perhaps some tips or hacks that might increase the likelihood of the listener living to 100.
Yes. Well, what I try to do is, as a scientist, that the good science looks for what works and creates theories about it. It doesn't go the other way. So what I wanted to know was, who are these people that are living well and they're old and they're not in nursing homes or they're not vegetating? I had to create a theory to understand these people. And at first I came in with the reductionistic model. Well, it's got to be genetics. I even have the Methuselah gene and all that, but it has nothing to do with genetics. That's
amazing.
So I found that genetics only accounts for 20, 25 at most %. The rest is the biocultural components that they live. It's not genetics. I interviewed, actually in LA, a 107-year-old Zen master, and I asked him, when did your parents die? And he gave me a real Zen zinger. They'll die when I die. And I thought, damn, I got to find out. But
Great answer.
I needed evidence. So I asked this assistant, and she told me the father died at 70 and the mother died at 75. And the guy was 107 years old. So the correlation is 20%, no more. Longevity is learned. And what do you learn? Number one, you learn to extend the concept of time. And the way you extend time is, I'll give you examples. I asked the centenarians, I love what you're doing now. What plans do you have for the next few weeks? Let me tell you what I have in mind for the next 4 years with my garden, 102. They elongate time. If they die, they die. But what you're doing is this, the psychology of time gets elongated. The consequences are you're not living in the urgent present. You have time for everything. I have a friend who's 90, and I asked him, hey, look, why don't we go to Costa Rica this last year, 2020? He said, nope, 2020, I'm too busy, 2021. So yeah, how they think. That's
amazing.
Thing. You have to think that way. That's how you hack biology. Not totally, but you're hacking it in a way that you'll get out of the urgent present. There's plenty of time. And if you die tomorrow, well, too bad. But there was plenty of time until that day. So you don't live with high cortisol. You live with, God can do it tomorrow. This guy, 2021, he's 90, but 2020 is too busy. That's the first thing. The other thing is that the present is never too late to make decisions.
The present is never too late to make decisions. Good point.
I asked a centenarian, I think he was 101. I asked him, so what are your plans? He said, next week I'm starting to learn German. It's going to take me a while. Now, if you live in the portal of the old, look at your age. I mean, look, your brain is already, there's a lot of deficits. And why would you want to learn German? You got so little time to live. That's how they put you into the portal, especially the middle-age portal. You go into the middle-age portal. If you're not aware, you'll look middle-aged, act middle-aged, and get sick like the middle-aged within a year because you're middle-aged. And then the co-authors, you'll say, I just want to go back to school. Look, start saving. You got retirement coming up. You got nursing homes you have to think about. So all of a sudden they put you and after a while you acquiesce and you give it up and you start dressing like middle age. And I went to a conference in Brazil and I was wearing an Abercrombie shirt. And this guy said, hey, I wear Abercrombie shirts too. But people tell me, you want to look like a teenager? I said, no, just tell them, no, I want teenagers to look like me. That's what
That's great.
See how they box you.
I absolutely get it. And the gem that you gave us in 2017 was never, ever say you are middle-aged. That just imposing that label tells your brain and body so many things. Can you talk about what happens to the brain and the body if we come to the idea, okay, the doctor told me I'm middle-aged, therefore I'm middle-aged.
And you buy what I call the tunnel of helplessness that you buy. But I'll give you an example. You know, as a psychologist, that the brain will project out to time and space. So one study that showed pretty clearly that is that they had two groups. They said to each group, look, we're going to shock you. In one group, they said, we're going to shock you for 2 minutes and it'll hurt a little, but it won't be too bad. And we're going to shock you every 15 seconds for 2 minutes. The other people, they told them, we're going to shock you for 5 minutes And they measured physiologically, subjectively, the units of pain. And the people who were in the 2 minutes had significantly less physiological pain because the brain projects time and space.
Brilliant.
And we project time and space for our longevity too.
The 5-minute group wasn't actually hit for 5 minutes, they were hit for 2 minutes as well.
That's right. So they could stop at the same time. Exactly. And then significantly.
But the expectation and the accommodation.
Even the physiology went along with that. It showed greater response with the physiology because the brain says, I can take it for 2 minutes. 5 minutes, that's an eternity. So you set yourself up for the pain receptors to be in tune with your perception.
Incredible. You also talk about Ellen Langer's study from Harvard, and I just love that one. I was wondering if you could share that one because it's so illustrative of the illusion of aging.
Yes. Ellen Langer is brilliant. She's a good friend and just an outstanding researcher. All her experiments are very simple, just beautiful. The Occam's razor, you cut them into simple elegance. And what she did is she took a group of, back in the, I think it was in the 80s, she took a group of men in their 80s and above, and she divided them into two groups. One group, she said, okay, look, you're going to live as if you were 20 years younger. Bring a tag with your name and picture of when you were 20 years younger. You're going into a time machine where all you're going to see is things like I love Lucy, whatever at that time. And you cannot speak beyond a certain year. You can only talk about the other group. They said, we're just going to get you together and we want you to reminisce about the good old days. So that was it. The good old days, one was living it. The other one is reminiscing. So the one that was living it did so well. They came in with a portal of the old guy. Oh, where do I can't carry my bag. Well, I'm sorry. You're just going to have to either take one piece of clothing at a time. At the end of the experiment, they were playing touch football.
Wow.
The guys who were living it. It was so good that on the fifth day, they were doing so well. They did really good measures of aging, like 1-point addition and strength of grip, appetite, all that. They were doing so well, the people that were living it, that she brought in some independent raters, and she had a picture of day 1 and day 5, and she inverted the pictures, and she said, what is the difference in age in these people? And they said 5 to 8 years.
Oh, my goodness.
The other people were about the same or got worse because they were living something that didn't exist anymore. So the as-if world is extremely important. Now, here's what happened with Ellen. At the time, you're a pioneer. They went back, and she didn't look into what could happen when they go back into the portal.
Right into society, back
6
into...
months. That's right. They've lost it because Grandpa...
All of their gains were lost.
Yeah. Grandpa comes in with his bag. Grandpa, let me help. No, I'll help you, Grandpa. I'm going to get some coffee. No, I'll get it for you. So they acquiesce, and Grandpa was Grandpa 6 months later.
It's tragic. And you talked at the beginning about culture and its impact and various ideas around the concept of culture. There's so many ways of interpreting the word culture. But in this case, culture, which intends to help the elders, actually harms the elders.
Yeah, of course. And the companies that reward gerontocracy, the older you get, don't do very well.
Gerontocracy.
They don't do very well.
What does that mean?
That means that as you grow older, you get more advances and you're considered more important. They're idiots at 80 and geniuses at 20. So the technocracy and the ones that have to do with performance are the companies that do really well. And Japan had to change that because Japan, as you know, is very gerontocracy oriented. And what happened is that something that I look in corporations, and I call it retirement consciousness. So let's say in France, you retire at 55 or 60. I found that up to 10 years before, managers and CEOs go into, it's not all, but some, go into what I call retirement consciousness. It's a presenteeism. They're not there anymore. They're thinking about when they're going fishing. Creativity goes down. Risk-taking goes down. Novelty goes down. Productivity goes down. And health goes down. Because of that consciousness. I worked with a company in France who had to get rid of the guy because he was 5 years away from retirement and he was the epitome of retirement consciousness. Why don't we do it? No, that's not going to work. No, you ain't just that. Because all he wanted is just those 5 years and get out. He was taken out into a higher position where he didn't have to do anything because they had a strong contract. They brought a new person in who was hungry and wanted to make changes. Significant change in productivity and wellness within the next 2 quarters, just from that.
Brilliant. And you also use the word retire. And I love that your take on the word retire, as in like to retire a car rather than to just submit to retirement. Can you talk about that idea of retire?
Retirement is the worst thing you can do. You can shift your meaning and your joy. But if you retire, you would think, all right, I was a CEO of this company and it was so much a hassle. Now I'm going to Florida to watch a sunset. Death sentence, 4 to 5 years of death. Dementia, very high, because your brain requires novelty, constant novelty. So if you retire or you get out, you have to shift your joy. So what can I do with all this knowledge? I could teach, I could coach, I could do whatever. It's not workaholic. It's meaning. The brain needs meaning. That, for example, We're the only animal, they call it the grandmother effect, that can actually continue to look young and live beyond our fertility. A lot of animals die or they start getting old looking and after their fertility because they're still in the Darwinian. We have now consciousness. So what the orcas do and humans do is instead of continuing to produce children, they continue to produce meaning and knowledge. The orcas, when they can no longer reproduce, they become guides for the new pups and they take them where the food is and away from the danger. They call it the grandmother effect. So how do you hack the immune system? Continuing to produce children after fertility, or you don't want any more children, they're called meaningful conditions. That's all the brain needs, meaning. And then it's okay because it gets confused with whether you have a child or whether you have a new meaning.
My father had a really good career as a radiologist, and he retired 20 years ago, rather young. And his first question to me was, Adam, how do I learn Spanish? And I told him, you need to do 3 things. And 2 of them were hire my Spanish teacher from high school. And the other was go be an exchange student to a homestay. So he actually had a homestay mom. I think she was in her 30s. His homestay father was probably just a little older. And my father was by this time, 60, and he was more than happy to be an exchange student at that age. And I think about your guy who's learning German. And one of the things that I believe I've read accounts of are that if we want to ward off Alzheimer's, learning a foreign language can really be amazing cognitively.
Yes, very much. You get to cognitive registers that you normally wouldn't. But again, you think about it, and it goes against the conventional concept of gerontology. Gerontology studies the pathology of aging. I study the causes of health as you grow older. It's a difference. And you look at lifespan and wellness span. So if you're 90 in good health and you're 20 in bad health, your probability of living longer is in the 90, not in the 20s, because you don't have the wellness span that the other one. And so what you're doing at 90s, you really learned how to live well. Your longevity and your wellness span go together. Like my friend who's 90, I asked him, what medication do you take? He said, nothing. I just take bourbon. He's from Kentucky. I just take bourbon when I go to after dinner.
That was one of your other funny findings, that people who age well are not necessarily people who don't drink alcohol. They're not necessarily people who are vegan. They often engage in funny rituals that seem counterintuitive to good aging, like smoking a cigar at a particular time of the night, but that they don't overdo it. I was wondering if you could speak to some of those funny findings that you have.
You hit it right on. The ritual is something you don't abuse because it has meaning for you. Again, the word meaning has meaning. So I went to Cuba to look at centenarians, and I asked this man who was about 99 or 100. I don't ask what are your rituals. I do kind of an ethnography. What are things that are important to you that you do on a regular basis that can have meaning for you? And, I smoke a cigar the moment I wake up. Good. Okay. How many do you smoke? 1. Why? That's all I want. That's all I need. Why don't you smoke more? I don't want any more. So the key is that the rituals are never abused. Excessive dysfunctional behavior is not love, it's need.
Brilliant. I'm just laughing because it so goes against, more, bigger, better. It's enjoying the beauty of it alone.
Yes. So somehow my body's changing. So I don't drink. I used to drink a glass of wine with dinner. Now it's changing to whiskey for some reason. So anyway, sometimes without thinking, I would say, okay, I'm going to have another glass of wine. And then, no, wait a minute. It's not that I didn't feel well the next day. So what do I do? What the Buddha says, create an infinity of what you're doing. And I said, okay, this is infinite. Every time that I did that, just a shifting of consciousness, I would always leave a little bit of wine because I had more than enough, because I'm mindfully drinking the wine because it's infinite in a sense. So you're tricking your brain. And I would never wanted another glass. That was it, because it's a ritual.
In practical terms, creating an infinity, I've never heard that expression, and I love it. I'm inferring it to mean that this glass is never ending.
Never ending, and the longevity of the time that you spend with it is extended. So what you're doing is your brain extends it for the dinner. That's it. Like with the pain extended. Okay, so 1 glass of wine is my dinner time-space allowance. That's it. But it's not out of fear. It's out of enjoyment. You really enjoy the wine. And what I was doing before is I couldn't wait for the second wine to come, the second glass to come in. And that's what the Buddhists call the suffering of change. The suffering of change is really interesting. It's like I'm having a glass of wine and I'm enjoying it, but I can't wait till I get to the second glass. And that's suffering because you're not enjoying what you're doing. You're going to the next thing. I'm having a great meal, but when am I going to have another one? Oh, well, I have another one. So you're in the change concept rather than in the moment. And that causes suffering.
Yeah, you're describing the difference between savoring and just piling in.
Yeah.
I've seen 2 children behave very differently around their favorite types of food. The first one asks, how long will this one last me and how can I maintain it for as long as possible? The second one goes like Cookie Monster and just shoves it in. And it's almost like barely even enjoying it while it's going in. Although I'm sure if were I to ask him, he would say, oh, I'm enjoying it entirely. But I think he's missing the point. He's not savoring it and he's missing out on pleasure. Can you speak to that? I think adults do this all the time, thinking this hedonic treadmill, just I'm going to go to Vegas and then I'm going to go to St. John's and then I'm going to go to Rome and blah, 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 blah. And they don't enjoy it.
What you do is instead of fighting it, let's say you're in France and you say, I can't wait to get to Italy. There goes my problem. And what you do is you thank yourself for catching it. Remember the primitive behavior modification where the rubber band, you hit yourself? What you're teaching is pain. And what the brain is saying, let me teach you about pain being your change vehicle. That's what you learn. When you catch yourself doing something wrong, it's, oh, how beautiful. I caught it. Great. Let me celebrate that. Now I'm in France. What would I be missing if I were into the next place? What would I be missing? So you get back into the present. And what are the things that I don't like about this place? And what are the things that I like? What I don't like, I pull away. What I like, and then you start creating the meaning into what you're doing. For example, with coronavirus, I wrote an article about it that it's been read by over 40,000 people. And what I talk about is cave consciousness. You cannot take the I self to quarantine because it doesn't know how to function. You take the 150,000 years you have of Homo sapien to the cave. And what is one of the epigenetic things that we transferred? Fire. Fire is really important. You can cook the food. It protects you from animals, keeps you warm, brings you together with people. So what are you going to do? Light a fire? No, you have candle dinners. And that's what I had. Candle dinners. Epigenetically, it's in your DNA already. Candle, safety.
Isn't that incredible? I know a psychologist who has taken lighting candles since the coronavirus.
Yeah.
In her office.
Perfect.
That's brilliant. This is so much fun.
I'm enjoying it. Thank you.
This is so much fun. Can you speak briefly about I didn't know what stigmata was at all, and you've done extensive studies around people who experience this phenomenon. Can you tell us what it is and what is going on with people who suddenly start bleeding like Christ?
Again, it's a cultural thing because it happens with Catholics and some Indian Hindu beliefs that have similarities. But what I study is the Catholics. And the Catholics in the medieval times, Teresa of Avila and the others, would ask for pain, because that was the only way they could go to Christ. It's a medieval concept of pain and suffering to get to Christ. And there's only been about 350 since St. Francis, so it's very rare, 13th century. So when you find one that appears to be legitimate, that is not a hysterical or self-injurious kind of thing, some things very interesting happen. The immune system goes into a different set and you begin to bleed in the areas that Christ bled, one wound or all 5 wounds. It doesn't heal. It doesn't get infected, and people around you who are Catholic have spontaneous remissions by the concept itself. But look how interesting the culture. Initially, when you see the medieval paintings, they have Christ with the wounds on the palm of the hand. And we know that the Romans were very, very
sadistic and ingenious in that way.
Sadistic, and exactly, it's a good word. And they knew that you couldn't hold it here because it only holds 80 pounds. So they went to a part here that misses.
You're showing a part of your lower wrist.
That's right. Yeah. The desktop area, and they would crucify there.
Oh my gosh.
So the old mystics would have their wounds here, and the modern mystics have it here because after the Turing discoveries, they found. So now science said, so they have it here. So look at how the biology follows a belief system.
Unbelievable.
In one case in Mexico that I did it for National Geographic, and we were able to do whatever we needed. So I said, look, let's do some serious immunological work to see what the hell's going on with this woman. She was having the cross on her forehead, and she had had the wounds before. So they did all kinds of immunology, including taking a piece of the scab to see what was going on. So I was thinking, well, a normal immune system would have high levels of cortisol because it's kind of stressful to have wounds coming out of. You would have a lot of interleukins and you would have a lot of neutrophils that high because they're fighting infection and there would be inflammation. Nothing. Everything was normal except that the red blood cells were high. And that's because of the altitude. It had nothing to do with altitude causes red blood cells.
Sure, that makes sense. But her wounds would suggest that her interleukin IL-6 would be really high, and it wasn't. And you're taking these objective measurements of her. Wow.
So the immune system was hacked. It didn't do anything. And yet it's an ultra-biological concept. I don't know how else to put it, where although it's not doing anything, the belief system itself is doing immunological processing.
Incredible. I just had to throw that in just because it's so incredible.
Yeah, I'm glad you did.
We're getting toward the end. I'm wondering, is there anything I should have asked but haven't yet?
I think that the main thing is the power that we have to change things. But since we're taught, we're not only Judeo-Christian, we're Greco-Judeo-Christian in the West. And the Greeks and all taught you don't get too uppity with the gods, because the gods, look what happened to Prometheus and look what happened to all these people.
Icarus.
Be careful. Icarus, all of them. So what happens is that you really have a real hard time owning your power because of that. Because if you own your power, you have to become a demigod. And that doesn't work really well. and the cultures will keep you there.
Right.
So once you own your power, if you want to be religious about it, you say, oh, so my creator gave me this power. Let me use it. That's it. But we're taught already that if you have this power, not only do you get criticized for it, but you have to disown it. It's not mine. This is not mine. This was just I don't deserve it kind of thing, the merit model. And once you're able to get into that mystical state where you can actually say, I own my power wherever it comes from, then you can't excuse yourself anymore. And you can't go into victimhood anymore. And victimhood has a currency. The society will support victimhood. You don't want to go somewhere and you say, look, I don't want to go shopping with you right now. I want to meditate. No, come on, do another time. Look, I have a migraine. Oh, I'm sorry. Can I help? And the brain pays attention. Okay, so here's illness. Here's the ways illness comes in. And to end, one more thing about illness. You can cure, but you can't heal unless you go through two processes. What is it that this illness is allowing me to get away from that I don't have to do? And number two, even more important that science doesn't look into is, what is it that I could do without this illness that I don't deserve?
The first one I got, the secondary gains, what does it allow me to avoid?
To avoid that I'm not worthy of.
That was the second one. The first one was, what does it allow me?
If I have
a migraine, for example.
How can I say I don't like traveling? Instead of saying, I don't like traveling. No, because you immediately get compassion and empathy.
Yeah, I don't need to travel. I've got fibromyalgia.
That's right. But the other one says, this is something that's coming up here. I have an opportunity to now really, really play in the big leagues in tennis. You get tendinitis or whatever, because what it's saying biosymbolically is you're not worthy of this, but you can't stop consciously, so I'll stop you subconsciously.
Absolutely brilliant. Marianne Williamson said it and Nelson Mandela quoted it. We don't fear our weaknesses. We fear our strengths.
Yes.
We fear who we might become. I'm paraphrasing it poorly, but to that.
No, that's right.
And yeah, Icarus flying too close to the sun. I remember almost everything important that I've ever done. I've been totally terrified. And one of Oprah's quotes, I believe, is everything you want is on the other side of fear. And I think it's so good. As I think about culture and how you were describing how culture will pull you back down if you let it. I was thinking about the parable of the lobsters in the pot and how the lobsters will always make sure that none escape. Even if it wants to escape from the pot, they will use their claws to pull them down. And humans consciously and unconsciously do that for fear of being abandoned if their friend rises too high.
We do that. And I like to use what I call the Hercules effect, which Hercules broke away from the gods. He died for some other reason, but he saved Icarus. When he fell into the ocean, he came and saved him. And he saved Prometheus from the rock where the eagle would come and eat his liver every day. Hercules freed both of them.
And what do you construe from that story?
That then what you're doing is you can defy the gods.
We can defy the gods in that way, so to speak. And the gods being the dictums that circulate. Quietly or loudly.
That's right.
Don't get too big for your britches.
It's not God. I mean, Nietzsche said, God is a comedian with an audience who's afraid to laugh. And that's it.
That's powerful. Well, my final question, and oh my gosh, this is just, I'm having so much fun with you, and I'm sure the listeners are too.
Me too.
As we've discussed, we've conducted and been exposed to incredible amounts of research, particularly around belief. I was wondering if you could confer the ability to tweak people's thoughts in a way that would help them individually and would also be helpful to society at large. What thought tweak would you give people? And how do you imagine it would help that person? And how do you imagine it would help society?
Okay. Let's say you have a thought you want to get rid of, some belief system that you want to get rid of. Before you want to get rid of it, you have to go developmentally. Which culture editor taught me that by observation? You want to get rid of any time that you get close to winning, you lose. And then you say, yeah, my father lost all the time, but he always said, don't be like me. Don't be like me. So you learn by observation that no matter what you do, you're going to lose. Number one. And number two, who are the existing present co-authors that are supporting what you learned? And this is the latest in biocognition, so I'm glad you asked me that. And what happens is that people that are important to us, the culture editors like father, mother, teachers, are powerful. These are idols, whether you like them or not. And when you see that they can't do something and you best them, then you're shaming them, abandoning them, or betraying them. And there's a technique that I use to teach them how to do that. So if you gain what your father couldn't, you're besting your dad. And your dad is an idol, so therefore you cannot best him. So you have to keep it down so you don't best daddy. Totally subconscious.
And the willingness to override that programming.
Yes, because then let's say the shame. I'll shame my dad. Once you do the technique, you know what it is. I'll shame my dad if I succeed. In the technique, what you do is, what is the antidote to shame? Honor. Anytime that I succeed and I go beyond my dad, I'm honoring myself and I'm honoring him.
Definitely. Before I even ask about the resource for where people can get some exercise for that, I'm thinking about that scene in Searching for Bobby Fischer where the boy is playing his father in chess and realizes, oh my gosh, I'm better than my father. And the boy doesn't want to beat his father. And I'm very proud to share that my 15-year-old son, who has just an incredibly athletic body, beat me in arm wrestling. And I got to tell you, it hurt initially. It was like, oh my God. This little boy whose diapers I changed just beat me in arm wrestling. I mean, I still have a reasonably good throwing arm, but he beat me decidedly. And it was cool.
The beauty of it is normally you have shamed me subconsciously, but consciously we say, you have honored me.
And I will need to say that I went through an entire process around that. So I think that it's a very normal experience for a father to go through a whole host of private experiences, feelings and thoughts wise. But I'm so glad that you shared that one. Where can the listeners obtain some exercise, some biocognitive exercise from you?
There's a lot of free stuff first. YouTube, Dr. Mario Martinez channel. You can go to Facebook, MindBody Culture, and then the books that are available. There are 2 books and CDs and all kinds of things that are available. And now I have on the Empowerment Code, which is the part on the corporate, I have videos and all kinds of things available in the education part that people could access and continue to learn from it. But this defies a lot of the conventional science, but with good science, not just with wishful thinking. And
right.
So we don't attract anything. What we do is we have perceptual selectiveness, and that's a lot of power. If you want to look at the law of attraction, and I'm not putting it down, get 100 people in a room and get them to attract something. You don't let them out. They don't attract anything because they say it's kind of a field and they don't attract anything. But what you can do then is instead of attracting, look for what you need and look at the selective perception that you have and what are the belief systems that stop you from getting to what you want. And that's more powerful than any law of attraction.
And somehow tackling those and tearing them down.
That's right, yeah. And it's not easy.
And creating new ones.
It's not intellectual. As you know, it's an experiential process that you have to do. Otherwise, a mantra, I'll give you an example with a mantra or an affirmation, I'm wonderful, I'm wonderful, I'm wonderful. The neuromaps that say you're not wonderful say, no, you're not. Look what you did yesterday. But how does an affirmation work if you embody it? You could say, I'm wonderful. And the negative comes in and you look at your body, you feel tension in your shoulders. You observe it and you drop it. And then you ask yourself, in my archives, let me go back. When was I wonderful? 2 weeks ago, I was wonderful. Oh, okay. How do I embody that? When was I wonderful? 3 weeks ago. How do I embody that evidence? And then for the rest of the day, you do behaviors that give you more evidence that you're wonderful. Neuromaps that you're wonderful, then the affirmation works.
The mind needs evidence. And it sounds like it almost gives us an internal massage around those tight points in our body when we hear those.
That's a great way to put it.
Mario, I cannot thank you enough for meeting with me.
My pleasure.
You just are such a fusion of intellect, humanity, charm, incredible amounts of humor and fun, and just everything you dropped was incredibly useful. So I just can't thank you enough.
You made it just very easy with the questions you asked, and no wonder you're a psychologist. Well, it was a pleasure. Thank you. Enjoy, and let me know when this is up so I can get social media to support it and all that.
No lo dudes. Estoy muy agradecido y tú eres un regalo grandísimo.
Un placer. Muchas gracias.
Thank you so much, Dr. Martinez.
Take care, my friend. Bye-bye.
This is Dr. Adam Dorsey thanking you for listening to Super Psyched. If you know anyone who might like it or who might benefit from listening, share it. And if you liked the episode, please hit subscribe.